All right, there it is. Hey folks, Gavin, Seim here, and I just wanted to do a bit of a debrief update, talking about kind of where we stand. Just speaking for myself, of course, but talking about where do we go from here. What's the next phase? What did we see today? What happened? And what are patriots to do when a government, as Ammon Bundy said, when the government no longer listens, no longer hears the people, no longer follows their laws. Now, the chat room on this thing is completely out of control, as we've seen the past couple days. And so we're not going to be taking questions from the chat. You can chat there if you want. We'll try and moderate it. But it goes without saying at this point that YouTube's chat feature is very much out of control when it comes to moderation if we get any sort of large group. And of course, we're not going to have a huge group tonight. But for those of you that are really passionate about the message and wanting to know what's next, a lot of us, on the one hand, we're thankful that no one died today. And on the other hand, we're feeling frustrated because it seems like all our friends are going to jail because of this lawless government. And you can bet the FBI is watching right now. And we half expect sometimes that they'll be knocking on all of our doors anytime. What did you say, Nathan?
I'm getting wood doesn't echo.
Okay, I don't. An echo?
Just tell people to mention it doesn't echo. I'm not sure if it's mine or not.
There shouldn't be an echo because I have no speaker feedback coming through. Is everybody hearing okay? The chat is still in some form of sanity. So tell me in the chat if you can hear me.
Does it echo because it's bouncing for delay?
I see a couple. An echo should only come from feedback from my end through my speakers, and I don't have any audio coming in right now. It looks to me like everybody is fine. I'm guessing if there's an echo, it might be a local issue. Go ahead and refresh your browser. Everybody says it's clear, so thank you guys. Okay, so we got a few hundred of us in here. Look, if you guys have a specific question or an idea you want to contribute, we're probably not going to be able to get to them all. We're exhausted over here, and we are, however, going to be watching the post on my Facebook page. And if you have an idea or something to share in there, you can post it there because the trolls are a bit easier to manage over there. And so Nathan's right over here helping out, and he's going to be keeping an eye on that. And I'm going to be talking here, and we're going to talk liberty just for a few minutes. We're going to talk about this. We're going to talk about the rule of law. We're going to talk about how we can restore that. And we're going to talk candidly tonight. We're going to talk candidly about politics and politicians and God and liberty and country and constitution, because I don't know about you guys, but I am sick and tired of political games. I'm sick and tired of playing nice and not saying it like it is. And we have to be principled in our boldness. We have to be righteous. But at the same time, we need to recognize that we're not going to restore liberty in this country. Okay, let's start at the top. And that's what's happened today. We'll get to that in what I was just going to say in a few minutes. What happened the past 2 days? What happened on the refuge ever since January when Ammon and the Patriots went down there and showed us what it looks like to be founding fathers? What happened the past few months? And I've been getting calls all day, from the mainstream media. And I actually had the media show up at my house bugging my wife, and that was pretty creepy. But with exceptions, generally I'll talk to the media because we can give them the message. We can start controlling the narrative, and we've really seen that out of Oregon like we've never seen it before. Of course, there's tons of trolls. There's tons of people calling names. I mean, I've been getting thousands of Twitter responses along with Chris Hall, I'm sure as well, saying, "Oh, you guys almost caused those people to die today. You guys weren't negotiators. You guys really screwed up. You guys should be arrested." You know what? Let's get one thing straight. The only ones who nearly caused anyone to die was the government. The only ones who murdered and assassinated and terrorized in Harney County, Oregon, was the government. Those are the only ones. The Patriots didn't do it. And so first thing, we're going to see all kinds of garbage coming out of the government in the next few days. It wouldn't surprise me if they send people in there to trash that refuge and undo what the Patriots did in there, just so they can release photos and say, oh, look how they messed it up, and get the people on their side. Because America is so asleep. We are so blind, because blindness is what happens when a nation rejects God, when it rejects truth, when it rejects liberty, and when it refuses to love its neighbor. Blindness is what happens when politicians are more worried about their positions than speaking out against tyranny. But the overarching message of what happened today, it wasn't a surrender. We didn't lose. The occupation of the refuge, from the Patriots' perspective, ended today. And now it's occupied again illegally by the federal government once again. Someday, God willing, we're going to have principled men. We're going to have principled sheriffs, unlike David Ward. We're going to have elected officials that aren't committing treason. And the federal government will once again be thrown out of the Harney County Resource Center. But if the people don't repent, if the people don't stand up, if the people do not return to God, and actually, I think Franklin Graham kind of summed this up really well today, even though I wish a lot of times that Franklin would be more tenacious on opposing government, he's getting more and more that way, and we need to see more of this from our pulpits. Now, for those of you that are going to start whining at me saying, oh, Gavin, be quiet with the God thing, no, get over it. If you're going to talk about liberty in truth, you're going to hear about God. Now, I'm not going to be forcing God on you in terms of you have to believe what I believe. But we're done with this idea that people, including God and liberty, are violating other people's liberty because they don't want to hear about it. When you tell me to shut up and not talk about God, you're trying to silence me. You're trying to silence your neighbor. We're not going to have that. I'm not going to play the politician games with this thing. And we didn't throughout this whole process. Ammon came into that refuge, Lavoie came into that refuge, and they carried a message of humility, of returning the land to beneficial use, of restoring the rule of law. And then they murdered Lavoie. And so our hearts are still aching. Now we're looking at our Patriots, the final four that were in there today. We're looking at all these people in jail. And look, folks, let's be very candid with ourselves, all right? The United States of America is already gone. Our states are not united. We do not have liberty, and we do not have adherence to our Constitution in any fashion by this government. And so you have to start asking yourselves the tough questions. We have to start being realistic with ourselves. We have to start looking at the message of what Ammon did, and people said, well, wow, that was too radical. Well, you know what? Those patriots that founded this country were radical in the eyes of their countrymen. They were the minority. They were the principled, tenacious few, and they had imperfections. But you know what they did have? They had a common ground in liberty. They had a God consciousness in the nation they were setting up. This was a Christian nation that we founded, and that doesn't mean everybody that founded it were Christians or that we were forcing that on everyone. But the principles of liberty were there. Let's deal with law real quick. There is no law but of God. That's who defines law. The reason it is evil to murder your brother is not because the legislature says, it's because God says. And so the fundamentals of law, life, liberty, and property, that really covers it all. But let's take it back further, because whether you love Jesus or not, he summed it up pretty well when he said law is this: you love God and you love your neighbor as yourself. America's not loving its neighbor as itself. The church is not loving its neighbor as itself, especially the church. And I hope leaders like Franklin Graham can step up and really start carrying this message. If you're going to a church and your pastor's, preaching John 3:16 every weekend and saying, hey, just listen to me, I'm the pastor, you're in submission to me, you need to walk away. You're not in submission to a pastor. Everyone is personally accountable. Everyone's accountable to love their neighbor. And love their neighbor doesn't mean like, oh man, I love you. It's like, hey man, I'm sorry you're suffering and that you're in prison. I really love you. You know, I hope God sends someone to help you. I'm going to pray about that. That's not love, guys. Greater love has no man than this, than lay down his life for his friend. Love is what the Patriots at the Refuge just showed America. It's what the Final Four down there showed today, despite their imperfections. And despite all of our imperfections, mine certainly included, today ended with no bloodshed. Let's make one other thing very clear. The FBI lost. 60,000 people heard them live last night trying to goad those men to violence. These are not negotiators. So when these people start trolling and they say, well, you guys aren't negotiators and you were trying to mess things up and you almost got those guys killed. The only one who almost killed people and who is killing people, who is arresting people illegally, who is violating due process in every possible sense is our government right now. They are in a state of war against the people, and the Patriots keep standing there and they keep saying, no, we're not going to be violent. We're going to be principled. We're going to be peaceful. And that is a right thing to do, because bloody revolution is the last resort of good men. And if God forbid it comes to bloody revolution, we better make some progress long before that. Because unless we have a revolution of hearts, and Chris Ann Hall spoke to this earlier, unless we have a revolution of hearts, a revolution of blood will not fix this country. Which brings us to another point. Your guns aren't going to save you. The Second Amendment is not going to save America. And so let me just say this right now. And bear in mind, this is coming from a strong Second Amendment advocate. You know, I headed up our rally in Olympia a year ago with some other fine patriots where we put 3,000 armed men on the Capitol steps in the largest felony civil disobedience in American history. You can Google it. And most of you, some of you at least, were there. You remember that day as we stood there in the early morning on that December dawn, and patriots carrying their flags and their guns, towing their children behind them, started walking out of the fog onto that green on the Capitol steps, and they said no. Over 700 people signed a declaration that day called the Declaration of Affirmation, where we affirmed our rights and said we're going to stand up. And so you don't get much more of a Second Amendment advocate than me, except for the fact that we have no rights because of the Second Amendment. Shall not be infringed means exactly what it says. This whole idea that, oh, I get a carry permit, or guns for people who are legally allowed to use them. Let me make something clear. There's no one who is not legally allowed to own a gun. For a government official in any fashion, I don't care if you're a felon or not. If you've served your time, you've served your time. And don't even get me started on the jail system. We'll come to that later. Okay? Any government official who tells you that guns or any of your other liberties require a permit, a permission slip, a signature from your sheriff, they're criminals. And they either need to be educated, because admittedly we have a nation that is filled with uneducated people, including our elected officials, or they need to be removed from office. Now, by God's grace, there was peace today. But let's continue this message as we lace through this and talk about Oregon. By God's grace, there was peace today, and it wasn't because of me. It wasn't because of Michelle Fiore or Chris Ann Hall or legislators. And don't get me wrong, they contributed a great deal. It was because God, once again, just like at the Bundy Ranch, heard the prayers of faith. And so let's put credit where credit is due. But at the same time, we did learn some lessons about this, because we saw that when we shine the light of day on tyranny, it's harder for them to move. Last night, we were in here working, and I got a call from David Fry, and he was frantic. And I was kind of like, great, what do we do now? How can I help these people? And he's saying, they're surrounding us, they're surrounding us. And I'm sitting on the phone, and I started recording, and I'd never done anything like this before, and I just said, well, we have to live stream this.